Hi, Real Recapped here. Today, we are going to be taking a look at a drama sci-fi movie from 2021 called Finch. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a brief look at Earth in ruins after a solar flare destroyed the ozone layer 10 years ago. We then see Finch Weinberg at the start. He is a robotics engineer and one of the few survivors still on Earth. He also wears a protective suit that shields him from extreme heat and UV rays. Just like his usual daily routine, Finch scavenges an area in search of supplies with his helper robot, Dewey. He then walks into a store and discovers from his measurements that the ultraviolet radiations in the area are higher than usual. As he takes his readings, Dewey picks up any useful supplies it can find from the store. Meanwhile, we see Finch packing some dog food as well. Before he leaves, he marks the area as a means to mark out the places he has already scavenged. We later see Finch, and he travels through what looks like a deserted town, which has been ravaged by the extreme heat and high amount of UV rays, thus making it impossible for people to live in. Finch gets a warning from his suit, which indicates that a storm is coming his way. Finch then turns the truck around and pushes hard on the accelerator, destroying anything in his way. While the giant storm continues to chase him, he luckily makes it to his underground laboratory and escapes the storm. The lab was initially owned by a farm that he worked for before the catastrophe struck the Earth. We then later learn that Finch had tuberculosis, and he is slowly dying, while his dog and friend, Goodyear, are seen waiting for him at his big house. He hugs and plays with the dog a little bit before preparing the dog food he found for it earlier that day. While the dog eats its food, Finch sips on his drink, but his supplies are running out. Later that day, Finch uses an AI to upload some basic instructions on a new project he is working on, which includes how to do household chores, how to care for a dog, and more. One thing we do know is that Finch values Goodyear a lot, so he works on creating a powerful specialized robot that can care for the dog long after his eventual death. We later see that Finch has been going through a lot of studies on the extreme heat and UV rays and their exposures. Then, he removed Dewey's eyes and attached them to the robot he was working on. Once Finch turns on the robot, he starts transmitting some data to it as a means to communicate. After a lot of failed attempts to communicate, the robot then nods its head. That indicates that it's starting to understand what Finch is trying to say to it. Finch is so excited by this new development and the fact that he made it a step further than usual. Finch then asks the robot to tell him a little bit about himself. The robot then says that it has some rules, one of which is not harming humans. But the most important rule is that it must take care of Goodyear by all means necessary in Finch's absence. Suddenly, the power goes off. Then, Finch heads out to repair the wind turbine. He successfully fixes the problem, and the power comes back on. While inside, the robot names itself Jeff. Later, we see a giant storm heading their way. Finch goes back to his workplace and connects Jeff to the weather station so that he can make a weather forecast. Jeff then tells him that 4 different types of storms will reach within the next 24 hours, and they won't be able to avoid them. He also forecasts that the storms will last about 40 days. After hearing this, Finch decides that they will have to leave the underground lab fast and head over to another location. He also believes that San Francisco is the best option available for them. Finch then proceeds to build a full body for Jeff. After making it and connecting Jeff's head to the body, Finch increases the robot's transfer rate and teaches it how to walk. After some practice, Jeff starts getting a hang of it and starts walking. Although Finch is happy with the way Jeff turned out to be, Goodyear doesn't like Jeff at all. However, as the storms slowly approach their location, Finch starts packing and unplugs Jeff's data transfer at just 72%, and because of this, Jeff still isn't fully developed yet, and still acts like a child. Finch then calls Dewey to leave with them, but he forgot he removed its eyes. He then installs a camera in Dewey's former eye sockets so that it can see again. All four of them climb into an RV and embark on their journey to San Francisco. Jeff starts getting curious and wants to learn everything that Finch is doing. For a while, it looks like the group successfully evaded the storm. So, they stop by a deserted town. Finch then pulls on his protection suit and tells Jeff to join him outside. He then teaches Jeff some important things, like how to scavenge, and some hazards of the sun. They also have some fun by popping popcorn out in the sun. Finch then stops and notices that the storm is almost at their location. He then gathers everyone and again tries to outrun the storm. But this time, the storm catches up to them. Finch then gets out of the RV and tells Jeff to help him tie the RV down with wires. But when Finch gets exhausted, Jeff takes over and ties the truck down by itself. They then enter into the RV, just as the storm draws closer. As it hits the RV, the wires start to pull off one after the other, until only one is remaining. Luckily for them, the storm passes by, and everyone inside the RV is fine. Finch then appreciates Jeff for the assistance he offered earlier, but soon gets disappointed after he sees that the front tire was damaged. They take out a spare tire, but Finch doesn't have a jack to lift the vehicle. Jeff then lifts it easily while Finch changes the tire. The next day, Jeff tries to communicate with Goodyear by learning its language. Then, Finch wakes up and tells him that it might take some time for Goodyear to like him. Later, they see a board that indicates San Francisco's distance. Then, Jeff asks Finch to explain to him the meaning of trust. Finch doesn't have a clear answer, so he just tells Jeff a story about his life. He tells the robot how he once solved a software problem alone, but still gives credit to his entire team. And that way, he was able to gain their trust. But suddenly, Finch starts to cough even more. They soon stop at a restaurant, and Finch starts to cough out blood, which gives him the impression that he doesn't have much time left. Finch then takes Goodyear into the restaurant and plays with him, while Jeff plays with the RV. Jeff tries to drive the RV, but it hits a car. He tries again and hits a wall. Finch then scolds Jeff, telling him that he was created only to take care of Goodyear. After leaving the restaurant, Finch then teaches Jeff how to drive. Jeff starts rough, but soon gets the hang of it and drives perfectly. Later that night, they camp by the road. Jeff then suggests that they continue driving at night, but Finch tells him that they could encounter hungry people if they do, and it could be dangerous. The next day, we see Finch vomit blood, and Jeff places him on bed rest. They continue their journey and stop in a deserted city. Jeff then takes Dewey out to scavenge for supplies. They discover a hospital that looks lauded, but because Jeff doesn't know that yet, they enter inside. Finch wakes up and notices that both robots were not in the RV. Realizing the impending danger they could be in, he puts on his protective suit and heads out to find them, despite being very weak. In the hospital, Jeff is excited to have found some food, medicine, and a jack, while Dewey finds some snacks but doesn't see the bear trap near it. And before it could get the snacks, the bear trap closes and rips it apart. Finch is distorted after seeing what happened to Dewey. He then apologizes and turns off its power. Finch then finds Jeff and tells him that they have to leave immediately because the area is not safe. They both make a run for the RV. They reach the RV and leave the city immediately, but they are also followed by another vehicle. After a while, Finch tells Jeff to drive. He also realizes the car following them. He turns off the headlights because Jeff had night vision, but the car continues to follow them. As they approach a storm, Finch grabs the steering wheel and goes off the road to use the underpass. He continues with his plan, despite Jeff explaining to him that the van is bigger than the underpass. The RV crashes into the underpass, which destroys the solar panels on the top. Jeff then uses his strength to push the RV further inside. Suddenly, the car that was chasing them approaches the crash site. Then, it stops for a while, then drives away. After a while, Finch comes out and sees that the solar panels are damaged and he cannot fix them. Jeff then reassures Finch that he can get them to San Francisco. But Finch snaps at him and tells him to shut up. Later on, both Finch and Jeff have a heartwarming conversation. Finch mentions how he found Goodyear. He then tells him how he hid in a supermarket while some young boys killed a little girl and her mother. The next day, Jeff drives the RV while Finch is still sleeping. He then notices a butterfly and pulls over, which wakes Finch up. Jeff shows Finch the butterfly. Finch then stretches his hand outside, but it doesn't get affected by the sunlight. He then steps outside completely and discovers that the UV rays have drastically decreased, making it less harmful. He gets excited as he sees more butterflies and flowers. They then continue their journey. After a while, Finch suggests they have a picnic under the sun while he shares some memories of his past with Jeff. Then Jeff suggests they continue their journey to Golden Gate Bridge, but Finch says he wouldn't make it. Jeff makes a promise to take care of Goodyear. After that, Finch brings out Goodyear's ball and tells Jeff to play a game of fetch with Goodyear to establish trust with the dog. Suddenly, Finch starts coughing out blood, then tells Jeff that his time has come to an end. Finch later passes away, and Jeff burns his body in the plains. Later on, both Jeff and Goodyear are now on good terms with each other, and Goodyear trusts Jeff more. As they arrive at Golden Gate Bridge, Jeff makes a memorial for Finch, and also sees several messages left by others for their loved ones, telling them where they can be found, which means there are more survivors. Jeff then puts a drawing of himself, Finch, and Goodyear on the bridge, just before he leaves with Goodyear to another location. And that wraps up our recap of the movie Finch. Feel free to drop a comment below as to what we should recap next. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and see you next time on another Real Recapped.